All right, welcome everybody to According to Andrew number 39. I have just a bunch of random stuff to talk about today. There's been some topics that have built up over the last however long, couple weeks probably, and I didn't have a ton to talk about them. They could probably be their own episodes if I had done a deep dive on them, but I just wasn't making the time to do that, so I wanted to kind of touch on them here, and then maybe they'll expand on it more, or you guys can leave comments on Social Galactic and at me, or the YouTube comment section, the BitChute comment section, and say like, hey, I'd like to hear more about this. Can you kind of look into that? And I will do so. So, um, what do we got for topics today? We got a whole host of things. Just some kind of funny stuff, some stuff on modernity, some stuff on money, some stuff on that NPC idea that Owen had brought up that I thought there was kind of like a minor observation that I had on that. Um, doesn't add too much to it, but I thought it was interesting. And some stuff on Africa and how some of the weirdness over there. And you know what? Let's start with that one. So I don't know if anybody else has noticed, but like when there seems to be a concerted effort to like, and I know like they're in America and stuff like that. There's the whole like black people victim card kind of thing, but and Owen made a good point of like at least in America, like if you're trying to do a eugenics program, um, you know, you have to be more aggressive with it when the black community than the white community because the white community you just sell them on lies of like overpopulation and what's the other one? Having kids is like a bad thing and all this other like nonsense, and they just stop having kids, and so that there you go, you fix that problem. Whereas that isn't the case in the black community, and so they have to do things like vaccinations and abortions to do that, but and maybe that's the reason that they're going after that, like Africa and stuff like that, is because it's kind of like a similar thing where they've gotten Europe to basically stop having kids. They got China to institute the one child policy, and then meanwhile Africa is just pumping out kids like no tomorrow, and they're like, oh, these people are going to take over in like a generation or two if this continues. So we got to go over there and aggressively be um, kind of push these put these NGOs in place and push vaccines and all that stuff to try to lower the birth rate over there. Um, and that's somewhat of a stated goal. There was that guy that did like the statistical thing where he said like the max population is going to be 11 billion, and his argument, and you could say that he's a nefarious kind of person. I think he's just um, I don't want to say useful idiot, but like from his perspective, that's kind of what he sees. That's the better way to say it. So like his thing was people start only uh, once children stop dying, they stop having like tons of kids. Now that turns out like if that premise is true, then the rest of his arguments follow. The thing is that turns out not to actually be that true. Because you have uh, the Amish population that has tons of kids, they don't have a problem. Mormons, same way, and those are in America. The Israeli Jewish population is one of the only ones in that's like considered like a first world country that has like a birth rate of like 6 or something like that, um, which is pretty crazy. Um, I don't know if that's going to change in the coming years, but as of now, they're pumping out kids like crazy. The Amish are at like 7, same with the Mormons. Um, So it's like it's clearly like more has to do with culture than it has to do with um, kids not dying and stuff like that. Uh, that I'm not saying that's not an aspect of it, but his premise was, and if it holds true, then the rest of his arguments make sense. Um, that women have so many kids because the probability of them living to adulthood was low, so you had to have a lot of them to make that happen. And uh, child mortality has gone down to a certain degree since past times. It hasn't been. I don't think that was as driving of a factor as he made it out to be. Anyway, It was a good TED talk. Anyway, let's see. So they seem to be trying to keep them down and out of the market. They're like doing stuff that sows discord in like all these countries. First off, the countries were drawn with just disastrous borders, right? Like a bunch of groups that aren't do not get along and aren't like the old tribal lines were just cut right through. So you have people that were of one tribe at one point now on other sides of borders that were put there, and um, you know they wouldn't have lasted had they not put people in power that uh, had a incentive to keep them in place. Though it is kind of odd that they have lasted as long as they have. But I guess when you have the UN and stuff like that being able to back you and bring in peacekeepers as they claim, really they're there to try to enforce state compliance and stuff like that, and so that the map of Africa isn't redrawn to some form that is much more compatible with the region and therefore allows the area to flourish. Seems to be like kind of the thing that like the UN's plan for Africa is. It's very weird. It's just more than almost any other area. You could maybe argue India to a certain extent. Um, Foreign interference has like intentionally gone in there and tried to mess with things to make it so they can't just like naturally progress. Because here's the thing: if they were naturally like, if their natural inclination was just to go back to tribes and stuff like that, which maybe it is, but it's like, okay, if that's your natural inclination, they're not going to be a threat on the world stage. They're not going to be, there's no major issues that are going to prop up. They're going to be basically their own self-contained thing. So why do you even care, right? There's two factors of why you would care as an outside source. One is that statement isn't true, and that they could potentially get good at statecraft and then come up and threaten you. That's possibility number one. Ethiopia has shown that they can be an effective state even before post-World War II. They were able to fend off Italy during World War II. They've fended off several other European powers. They're one of the uh, examples to look to for African nations on how to do statecraft, I guess. Um, but the other reason is potentially like the Matumba, which is all of the clothes that we don't need anymore are always dumped there, and this is to make it so that they can't build up a textile industry. As E. Michael Jones has pointed out, textile industry is always the first industry that gets going off the ground for you to start developing an economy, modern day economy. You go into textiles, and then you move into other aspects of the economy, but it always starts with textiles, which is kind of interesting. Very interesting observation. Um, so they basically they have all this cheap clothing and stuff like that they have that the West has no use for, that they just dump over there. And they maybe recover some of their money, and that's why they're doing it. But most importantly, they keep them from being able to compete because and keep. I think the people that are dumping that stuff think it's a zero-sum game, and there's certain aspects of it that it might be a zero-sum game. Where if African economies start getting going and stuff like that, now it's just it's it's one of the totality of Africa has I think the second largest population after Asia, right? Because in Asia you have India and China, which each have like 1 billion people, so that's 2 billion, and then like I think Africa accounts for like at least 1 billion people. Like there's a lot of people in Africa, um, and so that is a potential very large source of competition for the developed nations of this world, and so keeping them undeveloped is favorable to them. So that's a potential idea, but it's very odd that there seems to be so much effort and so much um, time put into this idea of keeping Africa down, and I don't understand it and don't know why. So if anybody's got any ideas, let me know. I'd be interested to hear. But that's kind of some of the observations and ideas that I have based on what I know um, about the area and stuff like that. And it's interesting. Like, um, if the premise that Vox Day says, where that they're naturally inclined to tribal units, is true, then I don't understand why you wouldn't want them to go back to that if you didn't want them to compete with you on the world stage. If you're like a globalist, I guess if you're a globalist, they're part of the globes, and so therefore you need them in your group. I don't know. It's very odd. Um, so on a slightly related note, let's talk about the Enlightenment and modernity. So, um, I don't necessarily have an answer for this, but we'll see where we go with this. So I have so are we actually past the modern era? There's a lot of talk about people with their postmodern thought, and we're in a postmodern society. We are in somewhat of a post-Christian society. But I don't know if we're necessarily postmodern or just end of modern period, right? If you look at how these things, where these things started, which is primarily the Enlightenment, which is also something I'm going to touch on right now. Um, you know, this the way when okay, let's start with the Enlightenment because then it'll feed into this part better. So the Enlightenment was this idea that everything there was a rational answer to everything, and everything could be based on rationality, and rationality alone was all that you needed. Now, the thing is, there was so much institutional. Christianity was so institutionalized at the time that even when the Enlightenment got off the ground, it didn't really have the ability to divorce itself from Christianity to the level that it has been able to now. And so now we've seen why that isn't true. But at the time, it seemed like it was true. A great example of this is I'm a big fan of competitive Counter-Strike, and so one of the things that you will see a lot of times with teams is they will get rid of their in-game leader, the person that's calling all the strats and telling all the players how to play and what to do and stuff like that, and coming up with the overall strategic plan for the team in-game. And they'll get rid of them because usually that player who has the strategic mind isn't nearly as good at the mechanics of the game, right? They lose the gunfights, they stuff like that. They're still good, like compared to like myself and average players, but they're not nearly as good. And so they'll get rid of them for somebody who's better in the thinking that that person doesn't bring anything to the table. And initially, it looks like that's true. Initially, what'll happen is there'll be a honeymoon period where you will have all the benefits of having that new in-game fragger and all of the leftover institutional rules and stuff like that that were set by the in-game leader still being used. But as the meta changes, and as just kind of time wears on, the will to keep kind of inflicting these rules on yourself that with no one else there to enforce them and have a reason to enforce them, makes it so that they end up slipping up, and they don't. That institutional edge that you initially had goes away, and then all of a sudden you're just 5 in-game players that can shoot heads but have no understanding of tactics and what to do on the map. So from that perspective, that's kind of what happened with the Enlightenment, except over a much longer period of time because it took a lot longer for Christianity to kind of be kicked out of overall society. So initially, the Enlightenment had this whole rationality thing, and then it had the benefit of also being in a Christian society. And then over time, as they've been like, see, it's working kind of thing, they've been able to remove more and more Christianity, and then that has led to this what they're calling postmodern, but in reality, it is the pinnacle modern idea. You've completely removed God, and and rationality is what reigns supreme. We had a glimpse of this during the French Revolution, where they said rationality is the only thing, and they tried to create like a 10-day week, and the Notre Dame was changed to a temple of rationality, and the society was fully atheist kind of thing, and all this stuff, and their supposed perfect rationality led to things like the bloody what is it called? Not Bloody September. basically all the executions to the guillotine, right? Like the guillotine might actually be an effective form of execution, but kind of like gas after World War II, it's not used in the same capacity because it just has this horrid imagery associated with it, right? Of just countless people being executed over the slightest infraction. So that's kind of the initial thing of what we've seen, and now we're kind of seeing what it looks like again with these ideas of, communism is one of the things that came out of it. Fascism is probably also a factor of it. You have, this postmodern thought of like, there is no reality. Reality is whatever you make it, kind of thing, and it's because there is no unmoved mover. There is no God in this society, and therefore you are God, and therefore you can create and decide anything that exists in society. And this obviously doesn't work, and it's an absolute travesty and disaster, and it's causing a whole bunch of issues. There's this lack of God is one of the reasons that we don't have why it's there's less than a coin flip odds that if you pull a paper from a journal that you're able to replicate it. That's supposedly one of the cornerstones of science, and it's just not true anymore because nobody does that kind of research. It's all exploratory studies because that's how the whole money system's set up, and we only care about money. We don't actually care about truth, kind of thing. So it's very interesting. And so when people say that we're in a postmodern society, I think people should start kind of rebuking that and saying we're not postmodern, we're just post-Christian and peak modern, right? We have decided to fully embrace the idea of modernity and the Enlightenment principles and the idea that rationality trumps all, and look where that has left us. We have these views that if like 100 years ago somebody had said, this is going to lead there, your reducto ad absurdum arguments, what they had come up with probably would have fallen short. And it's just, the Enlightenment was just a way for the devil to kind of sneak his way into what people were doing and stuff like that. Or, try sneak his way in over God by trying to say rational, you're rational and therefore nothing is above you, kind of thing. And it's the classic temptation of the devil when he brings Jesus up on the mountain during Lent and says, look at all this before you. You can have it as long as you kneel to me. It's that kind of hubris that modernity has wrought. Now, there's certain bonuses that have come out of it, and there's certain there's elements of it that, like, obviously there's certain advancements that we've had that maybe wouldn't have happened had we not had a fusion of some of the Enlightenment ideas and Christian ideas. So, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, as it is. Make sure that the positives, you keep those around. But I think what are the positives, I think will be somewhat, I don't know if they will be obvious, because I think freedom of speech might be one of those that's in there, and I don't think that one's going to last. So, yeah, that was one interesting thing that I had kind of on a little bit on this topic. So Owen had touched on the idea of the 4 dimensions, right? Or the 5 dimensions. So the explanation he gave was you have a book, which is 2 dimensions. It's, words on a page are on 2 dimensions. So a point is a single dimension. A line is 2 dimensions. 3 dimensions is, this picture is 2 dimensions. Trying to represent 3 dimensions. Then we have 3 dimensions, which is ourself. Add time to that, and that's our 4th dimension. And then the 5th dimension is, as he described, a projector, which is the unmoved mover, right? So it's taking something, it's projecting it's projecting into space a 2D image over time that shows a story, and so that is like the 5th dimension. He explains it like a million times better. Anyway, something that I thought was kind of interesting about this whole idea was how the idea of NPCs and stuff like that. So humans are 4th dimensional beings, right? I think a lot of times people consider us three-dimensional beings, but in reality, we work within time, and we can understand that there's a past and a present and a future, and therefore, if we can understand the past and make judgments and plans for the future while living in the present, then we are working not in the third dimension, but in a fourth. We are working along a longer span of time period than the current moment, and therefore we're not experiencing the world in three dimensions. We're experiencing the world in four dimensions. Whew. So I think one of the ideas of like kind of one of the tricks of the devil, as they say, and one of the things that they're trying to do with this whole idea of every year is year zero and nothing before ever counts, and it was the worst thing ever, and don't think about the past. This kind of idea that it's like the 1984 thing of who control the past control the future. Those who control the future control the present. Um, and so the idea is you're trying to strip away the past so that you can't plan for the future, so that you can only live in the moment. And if you're only living in the moment, then you're not a fourth dimensional being. You're actually a three-dimensional being that doesn't understand that there is a thing such as time. And so you'll see this all the time with the idea of trying to get people to be NPCs. I even fall for it all the time. You know, I don't plan and think and take steps for my future ability nearly as much as I should or could. So that's something that's kind of interesting. And you know, this idea of just always living in a three-dimensional space sometimes can be comforting, because if you don't have to think about the future and stuff like that, you know, you don't have to. Sometimes your actions will rationally say you shouldn't do this. Drinking is a great example. You know you shouldn't drink because you're going to be hungover the next day. So you, if you can think that far ahead, you're like, okay, well, I'll decide not to drink, or I'll drink less, kind of thing, so that I won't be hungover, or I'll make sure to drink water before I go to bed, so make sure I'm not hungover, right? So if you're not thinking, if you don't want to like worry about the consequences, kind of thing, you just want to live as the individual person, then you just like, I'm drinking, I don't care, blah blah blah, and then like you're hungover the next day, and you're like, who could have seen this coming? It's like you literally could have seen this coming. Another aspect of something like this that was pushed on the baby boomers and kind of the millennials and Gen Z, but the boomers really embraced it, was the forever young idea. You know, what's the idea of forever young? It's the idea that there is no time, that we aren't moving through that we aren't moving through time, and that you know, our bodies aren't going to be getting older and aging and wear and stuff like that. Like that staying in your current state of being a young teenage person forever isn't an option. Times change, things happen, you have to adjust, you have to aging gracefully was not an idea, right? It was, I'm going to pretend like I am a hot 18-year-old for my entire life. That starts to look pretty gross at a certain point. There was that absolutely disgusting commercial of like some old people in lingerie like saying like, oh, look at me, I'm so sexy, that made my eyes bleed and I almost vomited. So thanks Vox Day for sharing that one. Ugh. But yeah, that's this like whole thing is like, you know, this idea that they're still young, sexy people. Like maybe they still see themselves that way. Like it's amazing what you can delude your mind into believing. So that was kind of weird and crazy. So what else do we got? That covered that and that. Okay, so speaking of things that Owen had previously talked about, something that I kind of thought was interesting was I always had friends in college and in high school, college especially, where they would say things like, I don't want to work hard for, like, so I was the one, I wasn't like a straight A student, like working super hard kind of thing. Like, you know, I slipped up. I wasn't, you know, always the most dedicated, but there was a couple of people that I would run into that were my friends and stuff, who had this notion that getting a grade on a piece of paper was meaningless, but getting pieces of paper with dead presidents on them was rewarding and worth their while. And I had learned about the whole banking system in about my senior year of high school, senior year. So maybe this is why I didn't have this outlook, but um, it's interesting because it's like it's the same thing. Like Owen's example of the golden stars, right? Oh, I want to be able to. That the teacher has so many golden stars, and if I could steal those golden stars, and then I'd be super rich, right? It's like this is not how the elites work. This is not how the whole system works. The money is there to kind of keep you trapped, and you need money. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm trying to figure out what to do with my finances right now. Um, but the it the grade on the paper that says you did work and it was rewarded by this much because this is the amount of effort that you put in, or like this was the level of excellence that you were able to attain, is as real as like fake money, or as money, because it's all basically fake. And in a certain extent, to a certain extent, the grade is actually more reflective because the grade actually, um, the schooling system almost sets us up for failure in a certain sense, or actually sets us up to be more independent than we are by accident by having this whole grading system. Because in the real world, when you start working or whatever, like if I clock into my 9 to 5 job and I just show up and I kind of just do the bare minimum and stuff like that, like enough not to get fired or whatever, like no matter if I put in A for effort, like best thing ever, maybe I won't get enough, like a raise at the end of the year or whatever, but like my pay is staying the same, especially like for salaried people. And as long as I put in a mediocre effort, like putting in the extra effort, unless I'm like driving for a promotion or something like something outside the idea of money, then there is no purpose for me working harder. Whereas like in school, like there is actually like kind of a learned drive to get better, do better, and stuff like that, because it's like the more effort you put in, the better you understand these concepts, the better grade that you get in theory. Now, and personally, I never had a teacher that was like a vindictive type person who was like, well, I don't like you, so I'm going to grade your stuff worse. I've heard people run into those people. That's something that I haven't experienced in my life. So it was kind of interesting because it's almost the opposite of what they would say, where it's like, the money isn't or grades aren't rewarding because it's just a fake number or whatever. And money is something I can tangibly do something with. Which, yes, in a certain sense, yes. Like if you get money, then you have stuff to go spend money on and blah blah blah, and you can go see movies or pay your rent and stuff like that. But you don't need it, right? Like if you were if you're in a slave situation, you don't need it, right? If is like when you're a student, growing up in high school and stuff like that, like you're in a situation where you don't need money really. Like your rent's paid for, because I'm assuming you have a stable family in this example. Your rent's paid for, your food's paid for, maybe you have to pay for gas to get around, like if you have a car or something like that. You have to maybe buy a car. Okay, so there's two expenses that money is better than a grade kind of thing. But and you're putting in this extra effort and okay, let's assume that college actually pays out in this example. The idea was you get those grades so that it was putting in the effort to get the grades was like in my mind, it was a delayed gratification thing, right? So it was like, okay, work hard in high school to get good grades so that I could get to college. In college, do good work to get good grades, and so I can get the degree. Then the degree makes it so that I can get the high-paying engineering job, which is what I have a degree in, at the end of it. Now, turns out at the end of that, the engineering job wasn't there to a certain extent, and it wasn't nearly as stable as I was kind of believed it to be, and a little bit was sold on it being. So that kind of sucks, but mistakes happen. And now I just got to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. And that kind of goes back to the previous thing where I haven't been maybe thinking far enough ahead into the future of like what steps I'm going to take to get out of my current rut. Like I've just kind of been like applying to jobs and hoping things work out. Where I should really be thinking of, okay, well, let's assume that I'm not going to get a job because let's face the reality. The entire economy has been gutted and absolutely dumpstered. Okay, so that means there's opportunities, but it's like, okay, what are those opportunities? What are the things I want to do? And these are the questions I should be asking myself. And every single time I do, I kind of don't want to face that reality. And so I go back to living in a three-dimensional space and just kind of living in the moment. Not good, but that's my problem to deal with. Um, so, yeah, that was just kind of like a little interesting thing on that. And then what else we got? Okay, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do a fun little last thing, which I kind of saw. So, one thing that I've kind of noticed over the last time period, and usually I would talk about this on Monday, but you know what? I think I am going to talk about this on Monday. It fits better with the political thing. So I'm just going to talk about that on Monday. So tune in for that. So the last thing we're going to talk about is this funny little video from Spiffing Brit. So he did Bannerlord. So he does and tries to find exploits in games, and I thought this was it was hilariously like perfectly situated. So we Owen and other people have talked about this idea of grabblers or leprechauns or goblins and how they are what's the term? Not manipulative, I guess. Basically, this idea that the banking system is somewhat like a system where they basically rob from you, and then you're happy that they do it. So there was a great example of this that was done by Be Grateful Bear that kind of articulates this point, and then it just happened that the Spiffing Brit did like basically a parody on this, and I don't even know if he consciously like thought, oh, this will be funny, because he like made a little guy that was a goblin. So like and goblins, their archetype is they're greedy type people. So in that regard, that was intentional. But how perfectly it fits with like the idea of like a goblin / gremlin person trying to hoard money and stuff like that, and like kind of how modern banking kind of fits together of you thanking them for stealing from you, basically, is just weird. So I'm gonna show you guys the little part from the leprechaun thing, and then I will show you the Spiffing Brit part as well. And I'll make sure that it is not on 2x speed so that you guys can actually hear it. Alright, so I'm going to share my screen with you real quick. Get rid of that. Okay, so this is the thing from Be Grateful Bear.
Don't be like, okay, leprechaun, give me your gold, and then I'll sign your paperwork that I don't understand.
Are you fucking serious? This is too easy, bro. I mean...
Oh, no, seriously. What do I sign? I mean, I'm gonna trust you. I mean, you're wearing a nonsense hat, and you're from a foreign country, and you keep smiling like literally a devil grin, and you're giving me free gold. What could possibly go wrong?
Dude, when this all crashes, don't kill me. I'm a leprechaun.
No, I mean, why wouldn't I just, trust all my nutrition and news and publishing and war? Hey, you want my son? Take him to Afghanistan. So Bin Laden's still there?
You fucking believe this? When this crashes, it was still your fault for signing the paper.
What could possibly go wrong? Give me the gold, take my son. Why would you lie? You're a little trickster wearing a weird hat that I don't know. And you're like, dude, it's called chutzpah. They tell you what they do.
Read the fine print, teehee.
Sign on the dotted line, no problem. Why? I mean, I trust you. You are wearing a white jacket and a very small hat. And you have a piece of paper on the wall that says you went somewhere that I don't understand. So why exactly are you going to be cutting my child's penis?
Smegma, see? Teehee. The cancer on the PP.
So, okay, so that kind of encapsulates the idea, like the banking stuff like that. So, here's something that basically he found an exploit in the Bannerlord, which is a video game set in medieval times. Low fantasy, there's no magic and stuff like that. Anyway, all that's not really important. So, the glitch is, I think he explains it, but basically the glitch is, you can declare war on somebody, and then you, because you sue for peace with them afterwards, they're like really glad that you did that, despite the fact that you're a single person and they would utterly crush you. So here's him explaining that.
So overwhelmingly powerful, this is going to increase our relationship with him to 9.
Hold up,
Peace again. This time how to do is actually also immediately then submit our demands of asking him to surrender or die, saying that he is now meant to submit to us. This of course means we once again go to War of the Seven Empire. We will then leave the combat, click on him once more, say that we have something to discuss, and make peace again. This time, however, he's going to accept the offer of making peace, and because it's such a generous offer, because Jerry is so overwhelmingly powerful, this is going to increase our relationship with him to 9. That's right, Temian here is slowly starting to like Jerry. This is interesting because to Temian, Jerry is one single peasant man running around who no one takes seriously. He has nothing of value, comes from nothing, and really shouldn't be taken seriously. And yet Temian is so scared Temian will give all of his gold to Jerry, all of his horses as well, and then think that Jerry has been so generous in the offer that Temian will actually start feeling like he is friends with Jerry. This is very interesting because it means Temian is actually so submissive to the power of Jerry the Goblin that Temian loves being scammed by Jerry the Goblin, because for some reason the developers coded all of the AI in this game to love the sensation of Jerry the Goblin robbing them of everything they own. Now,
Okay, so that basically summarizes it, and you know, it's interesting because, you know, it's like the idea of going into a bank, giving them your money, right, and then them giving you a loan and expecting like interest on that loan and stuff like that, and they basically just handed you your money back, right? Like they didn't have any money, they didn't have like extra, like that's the whole reserve currency thing. It's like you go into a bank, you deposit $1,000, and then you're like, I need a $900 loan, so I can spend like my $1,900 to buy a thing. They'll take $900 of the money you just gave them, hand it back to you, say you owe us that back with interest, then hand you your $1,000, and then like it's expected like that's a good and then you're like, oh, this is a great system, I'm really happy about this. And it's funny that like that reality exists, and then like it's accidentally reflected in how you can exploit this game in Mount & Blade Bannerlord, where it's basically like something that in a certain sense is played out in a reality in our own world, and it's reflected in this game by accident. It's an exploit, but it is kind of interesting. Let's pop that back up and get rid of that. And so yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to talk about today. I thought it was just kind of some random thoughts on stuff. I thought there was a pretty good one. Fun little topics to talk about, not having to dive super deep into one topic, and just kind of giving light thoughts on a whole host of things. So yeah, Monday we'll be back with election stuff. If you wanted to hear anything more about these various topics, let me know down in the comment section of either YouTube or at me at Social Galactic or at BitChute. I'm on Podbean as well, if you guys prefer to listen to that stuff, just because I wanted to give an option for people that are listening. Note on Podbean, I have a free account, and so it only lets you store like 5 hours worth of podcasts over there. And so the latest 5 to 7 episodes will be up over there, and I'm just deleting the old ones to make sure that I continually have enough room. Just so people are wondering, like if episodes are disappearing off of Podbean, that's why. Anyway, thank you guys everybody for listening, and I have been. This has been Andrew, and this has been According to Andrew, and I hope you guys all have a good day. Goodbye.